Have you ever put your entire life into one person's hands? I don't just mean your trust or your loyalty. I mean everything. Your hope, your future, the very last flickering ember of your soul, believing with every fiber of your being that they were the answer to a prayer you had long forgotten how to speak. I have. His name was Jeshua. He came to us like a sudden cool breeze in the suffocating heat of our occupied land, Judea. He spoke of a new kingdom, a fresh start, a healing that went deeper than skin and bone. And we, the broken and the lost, we believed him. We followed him the way a starving man follows the scent of bread, the way a freezing woman crawls toward the distant glow of a fire. But there was a truth I didn't know then, a terrifying secret coiled at the very heart of our new family. If I had known it, I don't think my spirit would have had the strength to take that first step. I didn't know that inside our most intimate circle, among the brothers and sisters I would have died for, a betrayal was being meticulously planned. And here is the part that will haunt you, the part that still keeps me awake on the darkest nights. The one who betrayed him wasn't driven by money or power or even hatred. No, the betrayal was born from something far more complex, far more insidious. It was born from a twisted, broken love, from a faith so absolute it became a weapon. This story I'm about to tell you, it's about the razor-thin line between devotion and fanaticism. It's about how the purest of intentions can pave a road straight to hell. And the truth of what happened in that garden, in the final moments, will force you to question everything you think you know about loyalty and love. Before we step into that darkness together, I want to feel connected to you wherever you are. In the comments below, tell me what city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. It's a comfort to know that even across different continents and time zones, we can all bear witness to this story together tonight. The Judea of my youth was not a home. It was a cage, slowly closing in. The air itself felt heavy, tasting of dust and a pervasive low-grade fear. You could hear it in the rhythmic crunch of Roman sandals on gravel, a constant reminder of our subjugation. You could see it in the eyes of the merchants in the marketplace, a weary resignation. We were a people living in the shadow of two masters, the iron fist of the Roman Empire and the rigid, unforgiving doctrines of our own Council of Elders. Hope was a contraband currency, a dangerous myth whispered only behind locked doors. My own life was just another shard of that collective brokenness. A plague had swept through our village years before, taking my parents and leaving me, an orphan in a world that seemed to have forgotten how to be kind. I toiled in my uncle's tavern, my hands raw, my spirit hollowed out. Each night I'd stare out of my small, grimy window at the indifferent stars, wondering if a God truly existed or if he, too, had turned his back on us. Then one day, a whisper started. It was a strange, new current in the stagnant air. It trickled through the markets, past the watchful eyes of the legionaries, a rumor of a miracle. They said that in the hill country, an old barren couple from the priestly line, Ezra and Alara, had been blessed with a son named Yohanan. But the whisper carried more than just news of a birth. It carried the weight of prophecy. This child, they said, was not ordinary. He was a firebrand sent from the wilderness, a voice destined to roar, to awaken the sleeping lion in the heart of our people. He would be the one to begin the great uprising. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a tiny, fragile seed of hope took root in the barren soil of my heart. I didn't know this Yohanan, but his name became a symbol. It was proof that perhaps, just perhaps, we were not entirely forsaken. I began to listen, to collect the fragments of stories about the boy growing up in the desert, nursing that tiny flame of hope. I had no idea then that the whispers of Yohanan were merely the thunder in the distance, heralding a storm of unimaginable magnitude. a storm whose name was Jeshua. The years passed, and the whisper of Yohanan grew into a roar. He emerged from the wilderness a man forged in its harshness, his eyes burning with a wild fire, his hair and beard untamed. People called him Yohanan the Zealot. He stood on the banks of the Jordan River, his voice like thunder rolling across the plains, preaching not of peace but of judgment. He called the council of elders a brood of vipers and condemned those who collaborated with Rome. His message was brutally, intoxicatingly simple. The axe is already at the root of the tree. Purge this land with fire and sword. The time for talk is over. Crowds flocked to him, their own simmering rage ignited by his. They plunged into the river for his baptism, not as an act of repentance, but as a warrior's oath. The very air crackled with revolutionary fervor. I went to see him standing on the edge of the crowd, a part of me thrilled by his raw power, but another deeper part of me was afraid. Violence begets violence. Is this truly the only path? It was then that a different kind of whisper began to circulate, quieter, more intimate. It spoke of Yohanan's cousin, a carpenter from the small, unremarkable town of Nazareth. His name was Jeshua. He, too, had a mission, they said, but his methods were the antithesis of Yohanan's. He didn't shout from the riverbanks. He sat with outcasts and lepers. He didn't call for an uprising of swords, but for a revolution of the heart. A beautiful, myth-like story followed him of how his mother, a quiet woman of immense strength named Miriam, was visited by an angel who foretold his divine birth. If Yohanan was a raging bonfire, Jeshua was a still, deep well. While all of Judea craved a general, a liberator like Yohanan, my own broken soul yearned for a healer like Jeshua. I made my choice. While the masses surged toward the roar of the zealot, I quietly turned to follow the whisper of the carpenter. I didn't know that in choosing his path, I was stepping directly into the heart of a conflict that would tear our world and our very souls apart. I didn't find Jeshua in a grand synagogue or a fortified compound. I found him sitting in the dust outside the city gates, surrounded by a small community of lepers, the untouchables, the people whose very shadows were considered unclean. But Jeshua sat among them as if they were long-lost friends. He listened to their stories, his gaze filled not with pity, but with a profound, seeing empathy. And then he did the unthinkable. He reached out his hand and touched one of them. It wasn't a clinical touch or a gesture of charity. It was a simple human connection, and a miracle unfolded before my eyes, not with a flash of light or a clap of thunder, but with the quiet, sacred power of healing. The man's disfigured skin seemed to retreat, revealing new, healthy flesh underneath. Tears, silent and astonished, streamed down his face. That was the moment I knew. My friend Kalen, a fisherman with a temper as quick as a summer storm, but a heart as vast as the sea, felt it too. He joined me, and together we began to follow Jeshua. Kalen's own moment of truth came after a long, fruitless night of fishing. Jeshua, a carpenter who knew nothing of the sea, told him to cast his nets one more time. Kalen grumbled, exhausted and skeptical, but he obeyed. The nets came up so heavy with silver, thrashing fish, that they nearly broke. Kalen, this proud, strong man, fell to his knees in the boat, trembling. "Master, leave me," he choked out. "I am a sinful man." Jeshua simply smiled, a light in his eyes. "Don't be afraid, Kalen. From now on, you will be a fisher of men." Our small band became a family. We traveled from village to village, sharing what little we had. We were a collection of misfits bound together by the quiet gravity of this one man. Then the news came that changed everything. Yohanan the Zealot had been arrested by King Herod, his fiery voice silenced behind the stone walls of a dungeon. The revolution, it seemed, was over before it had even begun. A few days later, a group of stern-faced men sought us out. Their eyes were sharp, restless, their hands never far from the hilts of the daggers hidden in their robes. Their leader was a man named Silas, whom I recognized instantly as Yohanan's most devoted lieutenant. He came before Jeshua, his bow respectful but his voice edged with challenge. "Our master is in chains," he said, his voice low and intense. "The torch has been passed. Will you lead us now?" A tense silence fell over our group. I saw Kalen clench his fists. We knew who these men were. They were zealots, believers in the sword. Their very presence felt like a violation of the peace Jeshua cultivated. I expected Jeshua to turn them away, but he didn't. He looked at Silas, at the desperate hope burning in the eyes of his followers, and he said, his voice gentle but firm, "All who come to me, I will not cast out." That night, our circle grew larger, but it was no longer whole. A hairline crack had formed. By welcoming the fire of Yohanan into our midst, Jeshua had unknowingly brought a ticking time bomb into the heart of our family. And Silas, with his unwavering militant devotion, was the one holding the fuse. The fragile peace didn't last. The crack widened, splitting our family in two. During the day, we were one group, listening to Jeshua's parables of seeds and soil, of forgiveness and unconditional love. But at night, around the flickering campfire, we would divide. On one side were those of us who had come for healing, myself, Kalen, and the others. We were the seekers. We would sit quietly, wrestling with the deep, often cryptic meanings of the Master's words, trying to grasp the nature of this kingdom of God he spoke of. On the other side were Silas and his men, the revolutionaries. They didn't discuss parables, they sharpened their blades, practiced drills in the darkness, and spoke in hushed tones of strategy and tactics. To them, Jeshua wasn't a spiritual guide. He was a brilliant military strategist in disguise, biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The tension finally snapped one evening after Jeshua healed the daughter of a Roman centurion, one of our occupiers. Silas could not contain his outrage. He stood up, his shadow dancing menacingly in the firelight, and confronted Jeshua in front of everyone. "We followed you, believing you would finish what Yohanan started, and yet you heal the child of our enemy? We need a general, not a physician to the Romans. Give us an order, give us a plan. When do we fight?" The camp fell silent. Every eye was fixed on Jeshua, calm and unreadable, and Silas, his face a mask of furious frustration. I prayed for a clear answer, a word of reassurance. Instead, Jeshua looked at Silas and began to tell a story. A parable about a Samaritan, a hated foreigner, who showed more compassion than our own priests. A story about loving your enemy. When he finished, the silence that followed was not one of understanding. It was a silence thick with disappointment. Silas and his faction were visibly disgusted. They had asked for a battle plan and received a bedtime story. Even we, the seekers, were unsettled. The path Jeshua was walking seemed to grow more obscure, more dangerous with every step. The pressure wasn't just internal. The Council of Elders in Jerusalem now saw Jeshua as a serious threat. He was a rogue teacher subverting their authority, and worse, he was attracting a following that included known radicals. Their spies were shadows in the crowds that gathered around us, their pens scribbling down every word, searching for a pretext, for a single blasphemy they could use to crush him. We were trapped, squeezed between the internal conflict of our own group and the external threat of a powerful enemy. The air grew heavy, charged with unspoken fears. Jeshua seemed aware of it all, yet instead of trying to diffuse the tension, he seemed to lean into it. He was a man walking calmly into the eye of a storm of his own making, and all we could do was hold on to our tattered faith as the ground began to tremble beneath our feet. The breaking point came during the week of Passover as we journeyed into Jerusalem. The city was a powder keg, thousands of pilgrims, legions of Roman soldiers on high alert, and the Council of Elders paranoid and watchful. Any spark could set it all ablaze. Jeshua didn't just bring a spark, he brought a torch. He strode directly into the temple, the heart of the elder's power. With a cry that echoed off the sacred stones, he began overturning the tables of the money changers. The crash of wood, the clatter of scattered coins, the bleating of terrified animals filled the courtyard. In the midst of the chaos he created, he stood, his eyes blazing with a holy fury, and roared at the stunned priests, "It is written, 'My house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves.'" It was no longer a challenge. It was a declaration of war. He had just made himself public enemy number one in the eyes of the most powerful men in Judea. That night, the atmosphere in the upper room where we gathered was suffocating. The exhilaration of the temple incident had faded, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged fear. The door to any peaceful resolution had been slammed shut. Now there was only confrontation. Silas, his face aglow with a wild, almost delirious hope, could wait no longer. He approached Jeshua, his voice trembling with emotion. "Master, finally, you've shown them. This is the signal. By morning, the entire city will rally to our cause. Give the order. We are ready to die for you." Every breath was held. This was the moment of decision, the moment the revolutionaries had lived for. But Jeshua's response was not an order. It was a death blow to that dream. He looked directly into Silas's fervent eyes, a deep, sorrowful wisdom in his own. "Silas," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the finality of a closing tomb, "do you still not understand? My kingdom is not of this world." A silence, a profound, world-ending silence. The words struck the room like a physical blow. I watched the light drain from Silas's face, replaced by shock, then disbelief, then a pain so profound it was terrifying to witness. His dream, his ideology, his entire reason for being had just been publicly dismantled. He stumbled back, shaking his head. "No, it can't be. After all this, it can't be for nothing." The betrayal, he felt, was absolute. And in that moment of stunned silence, as we were all reeling, Jeshua delivered another, even more devastating blow. He swept his gaze across our circle of shocked, frightened faces. "Tonight," he said, his voice imbued with an infinite sadness, "one of you who sits with me at this table will hand me over to my enemies." The air left my lungs. If the first statement was a knife, this was the twisting of the blade. Betrayal, from within this room, from within this family. "The path ahead," Jeshua continued, his eyes looking at something far beyond the walls of the room, "does not lead to the victory you imagine. It leads through sacrifice." The room erupted in panicked whispers. We looked at each other with new, suspicious eyes. Kalen looked at me, and I at him. Who among us could do such a thing? My gaze fell upon Silas, slumped in the corner, his face a hollow mask, his eyes staring blankly at the candle flame. The agony of his disillusionment was curdling into something else, something cold, something resolute. My world had been turned inside out. The revolution was a sham. The king was to be a sacrifice, and the enemy, I now realized with a sickening certainty, was not just outside our walls. He was sitting right here among us, breathing our air, wearing the face of a brother. Later, in the disorienting haze of fear and confusion, Jeshua led us to an old olive grove on the edge of the city, a place we often went for quiet reflection. But there was no peace there that night. The very leaves on the trees seemed to tremble with foreboding. He asked us to wait, to pray, while he went deeper into the grove alone. I didn't know it then, but in the shadows of those ancient trees, a different kind of prayer was being answered. Silas, his heart shattered, his mind convinced of Jeshua's betrayal of their cause, did not flee. He walked a different path. A desperate, insane logic took root in his despair. He believed Jeshua wasn't weak, but merely hesitant. He needed a catalyst. He needed to be pushed to the brink, forced to reveal the divine power Silas was still certain he possessed. He went to the high priest's palace. He stood before the council. They expected a man selling information for silver, but Silas asked for nothing. He stood before his sworn enemies and, with the chilling clarity of a fanatic, laid out his plan. "I will deliver him to you," he told them, "but you must not kill him quickly. You will corner him. Bring your guards, your swords. Show him there is no escape. When he is faced with certain death, when he sees those he loves threatened, he will have no choice but to unleash his true power and begin the war. I am not doing this to destroy him. I am doing this to save him from himself, to force him to be the Messiah we need." The council, astonished but opportunistic, agreed. Then came the sound, the heavy tread of marching feet, the bobbing lights of torches slashing through the grove's sacred darkness. Temple guards, armed and armored, surrounded us. We scrambled to our feet, panicked. Kalen drew his short sword, a desperate, futile gesture. A figure emerged from the line of soldiers walking toward Jeshua. It was Silas. My heart stopped. This was it, the prophecy fulfilled. But he didn't approach with a sword. He approached with tears streaming down his face. He walked up to Jeshua, who stood waiting, impossibly calm. Silas reached out, not to strike, but to embrace him. A brother's hug. He leaned in and kissed Jeshua on the cheek, and in that embrace he whispered, a ragged plea meant only for Jeshua's ears, but its agony echoed in the silence. "Master, show them who you are. Please, fight." It was the signal. The guards surged forward. Kalen lunged, but Jeshua stopped him. "Put away your sword," he commanded gently. Then he looked at Silas, who stood trembling, a look of dawning horror on his face as he realized his catastrophic miscalculation. Jeshua wasn't fighting back. He was simply holding out his hands to be bound. In that instant, I understood the terrible, twisted truth. The most devastating betrayal is not the one born of hatred. It is the one born of a love that has become possessive, a faith that has become a cage. Silas hadn't sold his master. He had tried to save him in the only way his warrior's heart knew how, and in doing so, he had sealed his fate and shattered ours. They led Jeshua away into the night, and we, who were left behind, were utterly, irrevocably broken. That night, our family died. As the torchlight carrying Jeshua away disappeared into the darkness, our circle didn't just break, it atomized. We scattered like leaves in a gale, driven by fear, shame, and a grief too vast to comprehend. Kalen, after his one defiant swing of the sword, had vanished. I stood frozen for a moment that felt like an eternity before instinct took over and I melted into the shadows. Silas was gone, as if consumed by the very darkness he had summoned. The days that followed were a colorless void, a hell of silence and self-recrimination. I hid in a dusty attic, my ear pressed to the floorboards, trying to decipher the muffled sounds from the city below. I heard fragments, a rushed trial in the dead of night, false accusations, a sentence of death. Each rumor was a hammer blow to my fractured soul. It was over. Hope was dead. Jeshua was defeated, and we, who had promised to follow him to the ends of the earth, had abandoned him in his final hours. Despair is a bottomless pit. It swallows you whole. I blamed myself. I blamed Kalen. I blamed everyone. And yet, strangely, I couldn't summon pure hatred for Silas. The image of his tear-streaked face in the garden haunted me. I saw in it not malice, but a terrifying innocence, an idealism so pure it had become toxic. He was a victim, too, a casualty of his own broken heart. After a few days, when the initial terror had subsided into a dull, throbbing ache, the loneliness became unbearable. I sought out Kalen. I found him huddled in the corner of a stable, the mighty fisherman reduced to a trembling shadow, weeping silently. We said little, simply sitting together in the shared wreckage of our world. Then slowly, he began to speak. He recounted the day Jeshua had called to him from the shore, the feeling of the miraculous catch of fish in his nets. His voice was hoarse, but as he spoke, a flicker of the old light returned to his eyes. Then it was my turn. I spoke of the first time I saw Jeshua touch the leper, the gentleness in his hands, the respect in his gaze. One by one, others emerged from their hiding places, drawn together by a shared grief. We gathered not to plot revenge or to rally for a fight, but for the only thing we had left, to remember. We told stories, his parables, his miracles, his quiet words of comfort. And a strange, sacred thing began to happen. As we shared our memories, Jeshua became present among us again, not in flesh and blood, but in the very fabric of our stories. His teachings, which had often seemed so puzzling, now began to glow with a new, profound clarity. My kingdom is not of this world. I finally understood. He wasn't talking about abandoning this world. He was talking about building a different one right in its midst, a kingdom founded not on power and swords, but on forgiveness and fellowship. A kingdom built not by overthrowing empires, but by 2 or 3 people gathering together, sharing a piece of bread, and caring for one another's wounds. In that dark, sorrowful room surrounded by broken people, we stumbled upon a revelation. The kingdom Jeshua spoke of wasn't gone. It was being born, right there, right then, among us. The ashes of our catastrophic failure were becoming the foundation for a new beginning. That journey ended in a way none of us could have ever foreseen. The armed revolution that Silas and the others had prayed for never came. The king we thought would sit on a throne in Jerusalem ended his life on a Roman cross. By all outward measures, it was a complete and utter failure. We had lost our leader, lost our purpose, and become fugitives in our own land. But as I sit here now, telling you this story, I realize we didn't fail at all. We had simply misunderstood the definition of victory. The true revolution wasn't the clash of steel on a battlefield. It was the quiet, seismic shift in a human heart. It was Caleb, the hot-tempered fisherman, learning to forgive. It was me, the lonely orphan, learning to love myself and the broken people around me. It was our small, terrified group of misfits finding the strength to stay together, to build a sanctuary of kindness in a world of hate. We learned the hardest lesson of all, that the greatest power isn't in tearing down an old empire, but in lovingly, painstakingly building something new. Jeshua taught us about forgiveness, and now we had to live it. Not just forgiving the enemies who crucified him, but forgiving ourselves for our own cowardice. And for me, it meant forgiving Silas. I never learned what became of him. Perhaps he lived out his days consumed by guilt. Perhaps somewhere he found his own peace. But in my heart, I chose to forgive him, because I came to understand that his fanaticism was born from a noble desire for a better world. He simply chose the wrong path to get there. That journey took everything from me that I thought was important. My safety, my leader, my sense of a predictable future, but it gave me back something infinitely more precious, the truth. The truth that even when the brightest flame is extinguished, the embers can still glow in the darkness. And from those embers, a new fire, quieter, warmer, and more enduring, can be kindled. Leah looks directly into the camera. The sorrow is still there in the lines around her eyes, but it's now tempered by a deep, earned peace. Her expression is steady, her voice clear. Jeshua was taken from us, yes, but the candle he lit in each of our hearts, that light still burns. It burns here, in me. It burns in our small, scattered community. It is the light that guides us through the long nights. And that, I have come to believe, is the real beginning, the true revolution. Thank you for listening to my story. In many ways, it's just the start of a much longer journey. What became of us, the legacy of Jeshua, and how we tried to keep that small flame alive against the winds of the world. Well, that's another story for another time. If you want to walk this path with us, to hear more stories of faith, of falling, and of finding the strength to get back up, make sure you are a part of our channel. Hit that subscribe button so you won't miss what comes next, because our story, the real one, is only just beginning.